Several minutes of commercial-free football starts now. Here are the Purple Mortgage Guys.
Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Purple Mortgage Guys. We've got Goose, Tanner, myself, Brent coming to you again this evening. We're trying a different version here. We're actually live on YouTube for the first time ever. So if we screw up, you're going to get every outtake that we normally might have. Guys, hopefully there's not too many. And we wanted to jump on tonight and talk about Eric Kendricks news, obviously from a few days back. We're going to jump into who we think might be next. And then also talk a little bit of free agency on the offensive side of the ball. We did talk heavily on the defensive side last episode, so check that out if you've not already done so. Do us a favor, hit subscribe. Tonight, we'd really love to leave a comment if you have anything for us. We'd love to address them in real time here if we could. So, guys, we're going to jump right into it. Eric Kendricks was released this week. Probably all saw that coming. But Tanner, I want to start with you, get your thoughts on Kendricks, and then I guess what do we see as his what's the plan and his replacement going forward?
Yeah, it sucks to see a guy like Eric Kendricks, who has been one of the best linebackers in the league and franchise history for such a long time for us since 2015, finally depart and go his separate way. I'm probably not as hurt as Goose is. I know Goose really likes Eric Kendricks, but I think personally that it was time, I guess, for me. And it's more of a scheme thing. Flores is coming in, and he still runs majority of his schemes through a 3-4, and I just don't think that Eric Kendricks at this point in his career was a good fit in that system. And I don't like the idea of paying him $12 million either. Actually, it might have been a little higher than that even. So getting some fresh legs in here, hopefully a younger guy that might be in his mid-20s as opposed to his 30s, that can run the field really well, cover, be instinctive. And I don't really know how they're going to address this yet. This is a pretty good linebacker class. I don't necessarily think that I want to draft a linebacker extremely high. A couple names pop up like Trenton Simpson out of Clemson. Drew Sanders has been rumored to potentially go pretty high as well from Arkansas. He's a former Alabama player, actually, that transferred to Arkansas, and he just tore it up last year. The fun thing about him is he actually mirrors what a guy like Brian Flores wants to do with this scheme really well, because Drew Sanders is actually kind of like that prototypical inside linebacker / edge player. Like, he's really good at rushing the passer as well as being a stand-up guy and covering as well. So I think that's somebody they might be in on, but I don't necessarily know if I love the idea of selecting somebody like him at 23. So we'll see where we end up with that. I think it is a potential position that they could find his replacement in free agency. And I know we talked last week in our show about bringing in Devin Bush or Tremaine Edmonds, who's probably going to cost a lot of money. There are a lot of productive guys out there yet that you can probably get for less than $5 million and get somewhat equal production to what we saw out of Eric Kendricks and Jordan Hicks last season.
So I think, at least from my memory, Eric Kendricks has to be one of the top linebackers on the squad, probably in the last 20 years. Most fun to watch, probably one of the bigger playmakers. Goose, I know you were a fan. Any surprises there that they cut ties with Kendricks? Or I think it feels like we all saw this one coming.
I knew it was a strong possibility. I thought they would keep one of them. I knew it was you'd save more money with EK. I just thought that maybe there was an opportunity to get his number down, and he still has some productivity in him. I know they're mainly both 3-4 schemes, but from what we've seen and heard, it seems like their schemes, at least we all hope, is going to be significantly different. And I just have a tough time believing that EK is a terrible fit for both schemes. I think he's going to have a really good year next year, especially with a chip on his shoulder. So yeah, I was a little heartbroken when I saw the news, but I know we got to make money and we got to or recover some cap and do it quick. Just a bummer that he was kind of the first one to fall, especially while seeing rumors that CJ Ham might be safe on the roster. Love CJ as well. Just a lot harder to, and not as much savings, but at that position for as little as he got on the field, that was pretty tough to see EK be the first domino to fall. He's just always been a quiet leader and does his job. And
so you're disappointed in Kendricks not being on the team. I would say Goose would be devastated if Harrison Smith was to be cut. It's just, he's got a soft spot for Harry for some reason. So do you guys see Smith coming back? And then I guess Thielen would be the other obvious one to talk about, along with maybe Za'Darius. But what do you see there, Goose? Who's gonna make it and who's gonna be gone?
Yeah, it's hard to ignore the Za'Darius headlines about a week ago, hearing about his home being listed for sale, seeing some different things like that. Is hard to believe that he's still going to be on the roster. A lot of people have talked about Harrison Smith being effective in Brian Flores' system, his leadership, maybe some uncertainty at the position with Bynum not playing super well, Scene coming off a really terrible leg injury. I think you got to bring Harrison back, and I'd like to think that he would work a little bit on his contract. I feel like the Vikings have done a good job at taking care of him pretty much most of his career and his contract situations, and hopefully he pays that back a little bit now in the twilight of his career. If I had to pick who's next, I think I would land on probably Za'Darius. Maybe not the next one, but I feel like it's going to happen.
He was a different player the second half after the Buffalo game. Bob's giving a little shout out to CJ on the Jets sweep. I mean, he recognizes talent when he sees it. So, Tanner, what do you think? Who's next? There's going to be some casualties yet this week, right? We all agree on that.
The team has been prioritizing the big contracts first. Is probably what they're going to try to do. So Kendricks was like an obvious move. So I would think not necessarily that Harrison Smith is going to be cut like Kendricks was, but I could see that his restructure comes up first before any other cuts are made potentially. Or Adam Thielen. Like we know that he's not going to be back at the same cap number, and it's not even going to be close to what it was supposed to be going into 2023. So I don't know which of those two would be first, but I would think with Adam Thielen having a $19 million cap hit going into next season, I would think that they probably want to address that before free agency actually hits next week. So if he's not going to agree to the restructure, I would say that he is probably, unfortunately, going to be let go.
So the next episode we record will probably be next week. Is Adam Thielen still a Minnesota Viking? Yes or no? One word, Tanner. One word. No. Goose?
Wow. I'll say yes. But Tanner did make me think of something that I keep forgetting. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. My only guess is maybe the injury made it a little less clear cut, but the really easy, like, money saving thing that didn't affect the team that I saw a month or so ago was extending Brian O'Neill. There's supposed to be a big savings there, and for a 27-year-old tackle in the league who has solidified himself as one of the better tackles in the league, I'm kind of surprised that move hasn't happened yet. To not have to eliminate a player and to free up some space, I think that's probably the most surprising to me.
Gotcha.
I actually would like to resend mine real quick. I'm sorry. I actually think that the next move on the team is going to be Jordan Hicks.
Okay. Well, he kind of flies under the radar.
I was just thinking about how I was listening to Purple Daily the other day, and they made a lot of sense when they said that those are two very obvious moves, that those players can't be back at their current numbers, and Jordan Hicks isn't getting any younger either. So I don't think he necessarily fits Flores' scheme, so I could definitely see the team just giving Kendricks that grace period for a couple days. We respect you. We want this to be all about you. And then I could see as early as tomorrow seeing Hicks get cut.
Okay. Well, a lot of changes coming. Guys, what about on the offensive side of the ball? free agent wise. We did this with the defense last episode. I don't think we see a lot of movement on the offensive side, maybe addressed through the drafts. Tanner, you've hit on this a few times. There's a handful of potential starting centers in the drafts coming up here. So you guys see a lot. We'll start on the offensive line. Do you see any movement there via free agency, or do you think it gets addressed in the draft? What are your thoughts there? Tanner, start with you.
Yeah, I really like what we have for the very first time, and gosh, I don't know how long. I actually love like what we have up front. Christian Darrisaw is going to be a perennial All-Pro, I think, in the league for 10 years, based off what we saw last year, as long as he can stay healthy. Ezra Cleveland was a solid guard last year, specifically in the run game. I think Ed Ingram, his future is kind of unforeseeable, but I think that he is, going to be a starting caliber guard in the league for a while. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be the man going forward, but I think we have to give him a chance. And we already know what we've seen from Brian O'Neill. I think coming off an Achilles injury, that makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm confident that he'll still be a solid player when he comes back. So center is the one glaring hole. I don't think the team is going to want to pay Garrett Bradbury a ton of money. I don't blame them for that based off what we saw those first 3 years. So I do think that this is going to be a position that they could fill in the draft, and probably should fill in the draft, because there are, like Luke Braun, we brought him on a couple weeks ago. He mentioned that there are 5-6 guys in this class that could come in and be day one starters, regardless if you get them in the second or the third day of the draft. There are some really good players. So I could see the team filling that hole through that. But if they don't, there is one name in free agency I would like everybody to pay attention to, and that's Ethan Pocic, who is kind of like Garrett Bradbury, but maybe not necessarily from like a physical standpoint. Was drafted relatively high in the draft. Not a first-round pick, but I think he was second or third round. Went to Seattle, never really made it. Couldn't stay on the field. He was hurt a lot. Went to Cleveland last year in his fourth season, I believe, and he was one of the best centers in the league last year. Still couldn't stay on the field. I think he missed pretty decent time, 5 or 6 games, but he was solid last year, and he's going to be a free agent too. So I think with a guy like that, they could probably get a pretty solid steal on a deal if they want to bring him in, and if he's in a win now mentality and wants to be on an already established offensive line, and he knows that he can be the guy. I think that's probably somebody that we could take a look at for like $6 to $7 million if they really want to shore up their front five.
Gotcha. What about on the offensive side, talking receiver? You see anything happening there? I know, like you mentioned, we had Luke on a little while back here, and didn't seem to think there was much via free agency on the receivers as well. But Goose, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm a tiny bit more optimistic on the wide receivers. I mean, I would agree it's not a great class, but I really like a guy like DJ Chark. The nice thing about JJ is we're not looking for a number one. We're looking for a really solid number 2. And I think the tough thing is going to be if it gets competitive, since there's not a lot out there and the wide receiver class isn't quite the same as it was the past few years. There might be a supply and demand issue where people are overpaying for some of the 1 or 2 guys that can make an impact on the roster.
So you're saying supply chain issues are hitting the NFL as well?
Yes.
Inflation's real. Okay.
They are.
I'm following you here.
One of the main things, and I touched on it a little bit when we talked about our defensive free agents, is I think Kwesi's number one goal has to be to not be strapped in the draft. I thought about it a little bit again when Tanner was talking about cutting Jordan Hicks. One thing that scares me there is that leaves Troy Dye as the current starter. If you miss out on a free agent and then you don't hit on the draft, like to have to draft a rookie and expect him to come in day one is scary. Like I think back to like Isaiah Simmons, hasn't been like a complete bust, but he felt like he was going to be a surefire like Hall of Famer with his measurables and his testing and his film. Like he was all over the field, and I feel like he's just kind of been like, okay. Devin Bush hasn't been able to stay on the field. Like there's a lot of guys that I thought were going to be studs in the league and were picked early, and they haven't really panned out. So there's really not a sure thing in the draft ever. So to go into the draft with a complete hole at a position scares the heck out of me. So whether or not you think you can draft your starting center or a solid number 2 wide receiver, if you don't work things out with Adam Thielen, I think you got to try to at least get a serviceable player in free agency, so that if you hit, great. If you don't, you're not completely SOL. And I think center is one of those positions. Wide receiver, you can run 4 or 5 guys out there and kind of mix and match. And center, you have to have an option.
What you're talking about there is depth, right?
Yeah.
We all remember the Lambeau game with the false start penalties and the debacle that turned out to be. So yeah, we need depth at every position. 100% agree.
Yeah.
Tanner, talk to me about, we haven't even talked about Kirk's backup. I think we've resigned to the fact that Kirk's going to be the starter, barring something unforeseen in 2023. Who's going to be the backup QB for the Vikes?
I'm telling you guys right now, I feel like we're going to select a QB in this draft. I don't know if it's going to be with our first pick necessarily, but I am just confident based off like everything I've read and listening to Kevin O'Connell talk about these prospects. He's always bringing up quarterbacks. He's like, oh, I'd love to research the quarterbacks. I'm a former quarterback. So, like, that's naturally what he wants to do. So when you have a guy like Kirk Cousins, he's 35, 36 years old, that the light is at the end of the tunnel. And for a fact that Kevin O'Connell already in his mind, he's not going to be vocal about it, but he's looking for his replacement. Who's a guy that I can groom to bring in here that can be my dude here for the next 10 years to try to win a championship. And that's kind of scary to think about, because if they do probably draft a quarterback, that there's probably going to be some pieces that are moved around to go and get that type of guy. So I don't have like a specific player that's going to be. This is a really good QB class. I know Will Levis has popped up a lot here in the last week after the combine. He's got a cannon of an arm. I personally don't really love him that much, but a lot of people like the potential. So it sounds like the Vikings met with him at the combine and really liked him.
So here's a way to simplify that. Is the backup QB going to be a rookie or a veteran?
Yeah, I just don't know. I'd like to say it's going to be a rookie because it's cheaper, there's less risk, and probably a lot more potential. But there's a number of like free agent quarterbacks that would be really solid guys that you could bring in as well. I wouldn't be opposed to a guy like Kyle Allen. Obviously, he wasn't great last year, but I think that's a solid dude that is a backup in this league, and he can come in and like win you a game or two if you really need him to. He's not going to lose it for you, but he can do enough to win a game for you. So I think it's going to be a rookie. I just don't know where in the draft they're going to select that rookie.
Gotcha.
I'm really interested to see how they go from the standpoint of, I feel like the league had been going away from carrying 3 quarterbacks on the roster, just because every spot is so valuable. But then you see the 49ers situation where they're running a quarterback out there who can't throw the ball in a playoff game. And now you wonder, okay, like how valuable is, maybe you do take that roster spot for a third guy. And I think that's going to be the question. If PFF's been really high on this quarterback class, and the depth in it. So I think if KOC falls in love with a guy, and maybe there's some smoke and mirrors, maybe they're not, all over Will Levis, but trying to play a game a little bit. If he identifies a guy that he feels really strongly about, go all in and get him. They only come around so often. But I still think it's similar to what I've been talking about with most positions. I think it's a whole lot easier to go into the draft, especially when you're going to have to trade up most likely for that position. If you can't make a trade work on draft day, you have to have a plan. And Nick Mullins, I feel like, was probably about as confident as I felt in a backup over the past 5 to 10 years, that he wasn't going to be a statue in the pocket. He had a little bit of ability. And I don't know that he's had a good enough career where he feels like he's got to go. He wants a chance to start somewhere. So I wouldn't mind bringing Nick Mullins back. I've seen a little bit of maybe Andy Dalton, but I'd love a quarterback who is a little bit proven, but obviously not good enough to where he's trying to find a team that he can compete to start. And then if you get your player in the draft, great. But I think you got to address that position with a veteran quarterback who's relatively cheap and looking for a good roster to play on.
Okay, what about the backfield with the running back situation? Yes or no, Delvin's on the team come opening weekend next season? Tanner?
I'm going to say no.
Okay, Goose, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask Tanner then, who's the starting running back for the 23 Minnesota Vikings?
Oh.
You can say rookie, or you got to name a player. Who is it?
That's so fun, though. People want names, man. Gosh dang it. I just feel like in Kevin O'Connell's offense, it has to be a dude that's like semi-athletic. My only fear with Dalvin is you can't pay him that much money to have the production that he had last year. He played every game, but like he wasn't good. It was bad. And he already came out and said that he's not going to restructure. So you're either going to pay the dude $14 million or whatever it is, or you're going to have to find a trade partner and settle.
I'm going to say no as well, and I'm going to just jump out there and say Ty Chandler is the starting running back.
Oh, Brent.
Wow.
Salty.
Hey,
wow.
It's March. It's cold. It's going to snow. We need some excitement here. Come on.
I'm thinking with the whole Delvin contract situation, I think every agent and scout or agent and player, at least I feel like they feel compelled to at least be like, no, I'm not going to restructure. And then you talk and maybe your agent feels some things out and it's like, hey, we might not have a market out there. And then, but I just don't think guys are that eager to hand over their paycheck. I think the same thing with Adam. Like he might have to smell the roses a little bit and be like, if his agent says, "Hey, dude, no one's paying you what you're making right now," I don't think anyone's handing it over on the first ask. So I think he's going to be back on the roster, and I think it's because they're going to end up working something out.
I think he's going to get traded, and it's going to look like we gave him away because fans are going to see that he gets traded for a late round pick and be upset. But I don't think he's going to be back. Tanner, we're still looking for this name.
I could really see the Vikings moving to a scenario where a lot of teams in the league have gone, where they draft a running back semi-early, like third round, fourth round, and split carries between that guy and a free agent like James Robinson. Cheap. He's been productive since he's been in the league. He's really good in pass protection, and they split those snaps because James Robinson can be your goal line guy, a guy in pass protection, and then have another guy that can, run between the tackles, get outside, and catch the ball out of the backfield. I could see a duo running back.
So if you sign James Robinson, for example, do you feel like you have to draft someone, or would you be comfortable with James Robinson, Ty, Kane?
It really depends on what Ty Chandler looks like in training camp. I mean, he showed some promise last year, but when we saw him on the field, he's turning up against third stringers and fourth stringers, guys that aren't going to be in the league next year. So I want to see him do that again, maybe against some second stringers and, maybe even some first teamers potentially. I'm not saying that he can't do that, but I think people kind of hyped him up a little bit too much last year when he came in and was tearing it up in the preseason against guys that, like I said, aren't in the league anymore.
All right, guys, here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Go to your calendar, put in a reminder, September 1st, 2023. You're going to reference this video, and I'm going to look like a genius. Okay? Deal?
I like Ty Chandler.
I'm working on it. It didn't sound like it, Tanner.
Our bold predictions aren't supposed to be till the season starts, Brent.
I feel like Tanner likes to walk both sides of this. Like,
Oh, he does a
terrible,
lot.
but Chandler's worse.
What did I say?
I thought you were gonna throw out your Bijan prediction here.
I kind of wanted to, but I didn't want you to grill me on air. If Bijan Robinson falls to 23, and that feels very obvious, like he's by far the best player on the board, I'm not against that.
I want to hear from whoever's listening to this. Throw some comments in there and who the starting running back is going to be for the 2023 Minnesota Vikings, because I think this is a wide open, probably more than most positions. So
I have a question. If you guys had to pick one position that we don't address in free agency, like what's that one position that would make you the most nervous that we didn't do anything with?
Corner.
most nervous.
Cornerback. Pat Peterson's a free agent, and they have nothing but young guys on the roster right now. You have to have at least one veteran on the team. At least one. I don't care if he's even been in the league for like 4 or 5 years. You got to have one vet on the roster. If you're relying on a potential young rookie in this draft, plus a Caleb Evans, Cam Dantzler, and Andrew Booth, sorry. I just think that's a squad that is going to fail.
My man Bob here's got it figured out. He's got CJ in the backfield with the jet sweep and Chandler at that running back position. So we don't have a lot of money.
Brent.
We don't have a lot of money tied up in the backfield in 23, other than our quarterback.
Hey, I think I do think that's the winning formula is not a lot of cap dedicated to the running back position. I think that's the way to go.
That's kind of the way of the league, right? You can't pay everybody. So, all right, guys, that makes another episode here. Thanks for bearing with us on the first live experiment. And we'll be back. I think we're going to jump back on if there's another big cut here in the next few days. Might be just an abbreviated episode, but we got a little late on the Eric Kendricks news, and we want to be a little quicker on that. So if you guys want to throw comments in there, anything we talked about, Tanner, you got anything to close us out?
The tampering period starts like less than a week. So we will be back before next Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's going to be a lot of fun stuff coming up. Bob, thanks for participating in our first live. You will live in history now on the first Purple Mortgage Guys live. So we appreciate you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.